The wind that sweeps across the North China Plain today still carries the same ancient dust that once fell over this land more than 100,000 years ago. Fine grains lifted from faraway deserts drift silently across the horizon, settling again over fields that have seen countless seasons come and go. In that same vast plain, beneath layers of silt and time, lies a story the earth has guarded for millennia. If we follow that wind eastward, we arrive at a small basin near what is now Xuchang in China's Henan province. Long ago, this hollow was fed by hidden springs. Herds of Ice Age horses, deer, and bison came here to drink, and hunters once crouched in the reeds watching them move. The air then was colder, the light sharper, and every footprint in the mud told of a struggle to survive. It was here, in this quiet pocket of land, that scientists uncovered two fragile skulls. They were lifted carefully from the ground, piece by piece, after more than 100,000 years of silence. At first glance, they seemed merely ancient, but when the fragments were cleaned, scanned, and reassembled, something extraordinary emerged. The shape of the skulls, thick-boned, long, and low, spoke of a kind of human both familiar and foreign. These bones were not just old relics. They whispered of a lineage thought to belong to the distant caves of Europe. Features that once defined the Neanderthal appeared here, in the heart of China. If that is true, then the story of our species is far broader than we imagined. Perhaps the wind that still moves across the plains carries not only dust, but echoes of Neanderthal footsteps that once crossed this very land. When the scientists began to unearth the skulls near Xuchang, they had no idea how much history they were about to disturb. Layer after layer of yellow earth was brushed away until fragments of bone began to appear fragile, discolored, but unmistakably human. These skulls, later named Xuchang I and Xuchang II, came from sediments dating back between 105,000 to 125,000 years ago, during what scientists call marine isotope stage 5, a warm interval between the great glaciations. It was a time when the world was reshaping itself, and so, it seems, were we. Once reconstructed, the skulls revealed something astonishing. The brain case of Xuchang I measured nearly 1,800 cubic centimeters, among the largest ever recorded in ancient humans, even larger than most of us today. The bones were thick and heavy, the vault long and low, and the back of the head swelled outward into what researchers call an occipital bun, a feature known from classic Neanderthal fossils in Europe. Just above that curve sat a shallow oval hollow, the suprainiac fossa, another hallmark of Neanderthal anatomy. Even the tiny canals of the inner ear mirrored patterns seen in Neanderthal skulls from the west. Yet the front of the head told a different story. The face was broad, the brow strong but not as massive as European forms, and the shape of the vault matched fossils known from northern China. The combination puzzled researchers. It was not purely Neanderthal, nor entirely East Asian archaic. It was something in between, a true mosaic of human evolution. If you were to stand behind one of these ancient people, you might swear you were looking at a Neanderthal from France or the Caucasus, but walk around to the front, and the features would shift into something distinctly Chinese, ancient yet familiar. That contrast, frozen in bone, is more than anatomy. It is a map one drawn not in ink or pixels, but in the fossilized shape of our shared past. To gaze upon the Xuchang skulls is to witness two continents meeting in one head, two lineages braided together across time. It is a reminder that evolution did not follow the borders we drew on maps, and that even a single skull can carry the echoes of an entire world. To understand how the people of Xuchang came to be there, we have to look not only at bones, but at the world they walked through. Around 125,000 years ago, the planet entered a warm pulse in the long rhythm of the Ice Age. Scientists call this window marine isotope stage 5, a time when glaciers retreated and climates softened. In East Asia, summers grew stronger, the monsoon pushed far inland, and the deserts began to breathe again. What are now the dry basins of the Gobi and the Hexi corridor once held shallow lakes and streaks of grass that glowed green for part of the year. The Great Lose Plateau of northern China, today a land of dust and yellow soil, then carried a skin of grasslands and open woods. Small herds of horses, bison, and deer moved across these plains, following rivers swollen by summer rains. For tens of millennia, the climate pulsed in and out 5 warm waves followed by 4 cool reversals, each one opening and closing what scientists now call the Green Corridor of Eurasia. If you could see it from above, the map of Asia would shift like a living thing. The belt of desert that usually divides east from west would fade to green, linking the Altai Mountains to the Yellow River Valley. For a few centuries at a time, a traveler could have walked or ridden on foot from Europe to China without ever crossing true desert. In those intervals, animals wandered farther and hunters followed. There was no plan, no conscious migration, only people chasing seasons, tracking herds, and settling wherever the rains lingered longest. Over generations, small steps added up to great distances. A few hundred kilometers gained in a lifetime could, over centuries, move entire families from the western steppe to the plains of North China. They did not know they were crossing from one continent to another. They did not know they were about to change the human map. They were simply following the horses, the smell of wet grass, and the promise of water. In doing so, they were quietly writing a new chapter of our species' story, one carried not by intention, but by wind, by rain, and by the turning of the earth itself. For a long time, the Neanderthal was imagined as a creature of ice and darkness, a rugged hunter wrapped in furs, crouched in the frozen caves of Europe. Schoolbooks and museum dioramas fixed that image so firmly that it became a myth, the European caveman, doomed to vanish when modern humans arrived. But the truth, slowly revealed by fossils and genes, is far wider and far more human. Over the last 2 decades, bones and tools have traced Neanderthals far beyond their supposed homeland. They walked through the Levant, hunted in the Caucasus, and lived for tens of thousands of years in the shadow of the Altai and the Alai Mountains of Central Asia. At every turn, their story stretches farther east, following the same green corridors that opened during the warm phases of the Ice Age. They were not prisoners of the cold. They were travelers, adaptable and resilient, as comfortable under summer grass as under snow. Genetics now speaks even louder than stone. Every person outside of Africa carries between 1 and 4% of Neanderthal DNA, a whisper of that ancient union between species. In East Asia, the signal is even stronger, 12 to 20% more Neanderthal ancestry than in modern Europeans. The pattern suggests more than one meeting, more than one crossing of paths between their kind and ours. If you are listening to this story from Asia today, then part of that story lives in you. Your skin, your hair, your immune system all carry tiny echoes of the Neanderthals' world. Their legacy did not end in Europe's caves. It continues quietly inside billions of living people. This changes everything. It means the Neanderthals were not a failed branch of humanity, but a thread woven into our own fabric. They were never confined to one continent. They were never truly gone. They are still with us in our blood, in our bones, and in the shared memory of what it means to be human. While the Neanderthals were leaving their traces across Europe and Central Asia, another branch of ancient humanity was taking shape farther east. For years, it was known only from a single place, a small cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia. Inside that cave, scientists found a child's finger bone and a tooth belonging to an unknown kind of human. When the DNA was read, it revealed something astonishing, a lineage that was neither Neanderthal nor modern human. They called them the Denisovans. At first, the Denisovan story seemed confined to that cold Siberian cave, but new discoveries began to redraw the map. On the high Tibetan plateau, a massive jawbone found in a cave near Xiahe was analyzed not by DNA, which rarely survives at such altitude, but by the ancient proteins preserved inside. Those proteins told the same story. It belonged to a Denisovan. Far to the northeast, in the city of Harbin, a nearly complete skull known as the Dragon Man showed a mixture of traits that closely matched what we now suspect were Eastern Denisovans. And to the south, off the coast of Taiwan, a fisherman dredged up a fossilized lower jaw from the sea floor, young in geological age, with the same sturdy build seen in Denisovan bones. These finds stretch a network across East Asia, from the frozen mountains of Siberia through Tibet and northern China, down to Taiwan and even towards Southeast Asia. The Denisovans were not shadows trapped in one cave. They were a vast and varied people who adapted to mountains, plains, and islands alike. All across China, other archaic skulls, Dali, Jinyushan, Shujiayao, Maba, carry fragments of this same mosaic pattern: large brains, thick bones, broad faces, hints of both East and West. Together, they paint a picture of what scientists now call braided evolution, many threads of humanity twisting, crossing, and merging through time. When the Neanderthal-like people from the West reached the plains of North China, they did not arrive in an empty land. The Denisovans were already here, their descendants rooted in the springs and valleys. What happened next was not conquest or replacement, but meeting. Two human worlds stood face to face. They hunted the same animals, watched the same stars, perhaps shared words around the same fire, and in their laughter, in their touch, the heritage of two continents began to blend. Without knowing it, they were shaping the future of us all. Across the long stretch of prehistory, encounters between different kinds of humans were not rare accidents. They were part of how our story unfolded. Genetics now tells us that the people living in East Asia today carry both Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA. Those fragments of code hidden inside every cell are the living evidence that long before history began, these groups met, recognized something of themselves in one another, and shared life. Inside Denisova Cave, deep in the Altai Mountains, scientists discovered the bones of a teenage girl they called Denny. Her DNA revealed something once thought impossible. Her mother was Neanderthal, her father Denisovan. She was a direct child of two worlds, proof that their meeting was not a single spark, but part of a recurring pattern. If it happened there, it could happen elsewhere, and Xuchang stands as one of the strongest candidates. The skulls from Xuchang carry the same duality written in bone. The back of the head, with its swelling curve and oval hollow, is unmistakably Neanderthal-like. The front, broader and flatter, belongs to an older East Asian tradition linked to the Denisovans. Together, they form what scientists call a hybrid mosaic, a fusion of features that could only arise through contact and interbreeding. Imagine it as two great rivers meeting on the plains of North China, one flowing east from the steppes of Europe, the other winding south from the mountains of Asia. Where they join, their waters mingle, creating a new current, neither purely one nor the other. That current is humanity itself. These meetings were not just biological, they were cultural, practical, and deeply human. Hunters shared ways to shape stone, to track herds, to survive the winter winds. Around campfires they may have traded words or songs. Perhaps they never had a word for difference. They saw only people, other beings who laughed, worked, and dreamed much as they did. And in that shared recognition, a new chapter of our species began. When we imagine the people of Xuchang, we must remember that they were not ghosts or scientific specimens. They lived. Around the springs of Lingjing, archaeologists have found the remains of animals they hunted: horses, red deer, wild cattle, even woolly rhinoceroses. Their bones bear the marks of stone tools, the careful cuts of hands that knew how to take a life and make it last through the winter. Nearby, fragments of tools lie scattered, sharp flakes of flint, long bones carved into awls and points, scrapers polished by hours of work. Each one is a trace of patience, skill, and survival. The land they walked was a land of seasons. Winters were dry and cold, the wind carrying dust that stung the eyes. Summers turned the plains green again, filling the air with insects and the smell of wet soil. During those months, the springs swelled with fresh water, and the people gathered near them, following the herds that came to drink. When the rains retreated, they packed their hides, lifted their children, and moved once more, tracing the rhythm of the earth. They wore clothes stitched from animal skins, seams tight against the wind. They built shelters from branches and bone, camped near reeds, watched the stars from the same open sky that stretches above China today. And among them, perhaps, was a young woman of mixed blood, her mother's lineage reaching west across the steppes, her father's rooted deep in this eastern soil. Picture her by the spring, holding her child as the herd moves in the distance. She laughs at something the boy says, her voice carried by the same wind that still moves across the plain. In that laughter, Neanderthal and Denisovan are no longer separate. They have become one. Even with all we now know, science asks for patience. The skulls from Xuchang still guard their deepest secret. No strand of DNA has yet been drawn from their bones. The warmth and shifting seasons of eastern China make genetic preservation almost impossible. Somewhere inside the dense stone of the inner ear, the petrous bone, there may still be molecules waiting to speak. If proteins or fragments of DNA can one day be recovered, they might finally confirm what the shape of the skulls has already whispered, that these were people born of two worlds. But even without that final proof, the meaning of Xuchang reaches beyond labels or lineage. This is not just a debate about whether they were Neanderthal or Denisovan. It is about connection. Human history has never been a straight river flowing from one source. It is a braid, woven from many streams that twist and merge, separate and return. Each strand carries its own memory, its own laughter, its own way of seeing the world. Together, they make the fabric of who we are. The woman by the spring at Xuchang never knew those names. To her, there were no categories, no boundaries, only family. Yet in her bones, in the shape of her child's head, the world had already met and mingled, and we, the distant descendants of that meeting, still carry its echo. In our blood, in our cells, in the quiet patterns of our faces, the story of Xuchang continues. It reminds us that humanity was never divided by continents, but united by curiosity, movement, and love. This is not just a new chapter of Asia's deep past. It is a chapter of all of us, a reminder that we have always been one braided species, carried forward by the wind and by the endless will to belong.